always have to end every kirtan with Nitai Gaur Premanande. That's why we're doing kirtan. You know why we're doing kirtan?
Please their lordships.
Yes, so that one day we can receive that ananda, that prem from Nitai Gaur. They've come to bring that, they've come to give that by through the process of Nam Sankirtan. So Nitai Gaur Prem Anande. We want that.
We want.
Yes, so therefore at the end of our kirtan, then we say that. And everybody thinks, oh yes, very good. We just did kirtan, very good. So today is Sri Ramanujacharya, his Transcendental Disappearance Day. And there just so happens to be a very thorough Harikatha, which now, as I mentioned yesterday, that on the calendar, the Vaishnava calendar that we have online with Pure Bhakti, it now has a new thing added to it, which is, it's called Titi Harikatha. So for every day, when you go on the calendar, then you'll see it in like orange letters. Titi Harikatha. For any disappearance day or appearance day.
This is still CBS Chaitanya Mandir?
No. This is our purebhakti.com, the calendar. And then when you click on that, it goes to purebhakti.com. That selected katha. Sometimes there's more than one. So in this case, the glories of Ramanujacharya. This is from 2007. Yeah. So I'm going to read that today. Gaur Premanande. Let's see now. I'm going to make it bigger. There we go. Okay. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiu Ki Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai Shri Nishinga Bhagavana Ki Jai Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Saparikar Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Mahapagwat Srila Gaur Kishore Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Vaishnav Sarvabhaum Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Shri Gauri Vedanta Charya Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Rasika Shiromani Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai Srila Narottam Srinivas Yamananda Prabhu Trai Ki Jai Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Sada Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Srila Sarup Damodar Roy Ramanandari Gaur Parsada Vrinda Ki Jai Namachari Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sipaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Kshetra Dham Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dvar Shavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dham Ki Jai Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Vandeham Shri Guru Shujataha Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Om Jnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshay Kshiptashtaka Mari Taranga Madhye Kripama Itvam Sharanam Pravanna Vrinde Namaste Charanadavindam Vrindai Tulasi Devyai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namah Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My Dandavat pranams to the lotus feet of my most worshipful, beloved Diksha and Siksha Gurudevs, Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashtatarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashtatarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashtatarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My Dandavat pranams to all my Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga, and on this transcendental disappearance day, Tirobhav Mahamahotsav Titi of Sri Sri Ram Anujacharya, the Acharya of the Sri Vaishnav Sampradaya. I offer my unlimited Dandavat pranams at his lotus feet, and my Dandavat pranams to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. This was given on January 26, 2007 by Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And he gave it on the north shore of Hawaii, where he was there on this day, on Ramanujacharya's disappearance day. That informal darshan took place with only the devotees in his traveling party. So we especially thank his personal cook, Madhuvrat Das Brahmachari, for sending us the sound file. And that's the same devotee we saw that day, who's making the book of Gurudev's pictures. Srila Gurudev's talk in Hawaii was brief, and therefore we have included excerpts from his lecture given in Mathura in the year 2000 in brackets to fill out the history. Gurudev begins, Sri Ramanujacharya was born in South India. I don't like that feature on Pure Bhakti. If you move up and down slightly, then the whole thing comes down and blocks where you're reading. So, the word Anuja means younger brother. Ram Anuja refers to the younger brother of Lord Ram. Therefore, he is Ram Anuja. In Kali Yuga, he is the Acharya of the Sri or Lakshmi Sampradaya. He is the disciple of Yamunacharya. As a boy, he was exceptionally intelligent. At a very young age, he knew all Sanskrit grammar, Vyakaran, all Sanskrit literature, Sahitya, and all the deep conclusions of the Vedic scriptures. Sri Ramanujacharya is an incarnation of Lakshman, Lord Rama's younger brother, and he accepted the Sri Sampradaya. So who is Lakshman a manifestation of? Balaram. Yes. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he took many teachings from him, such as the duties of the sannyasi, the duties of the disciple, and the etiquette of the Vaishnava. He utilized 108 teachings. We follow these teachings, and we have also published them in our Bhagavad Patrika and our Gaudiya Patrika, the Hindi and the Bengali magazines. His teacher, Yadava Acharya, was a follower of the Mayavad theory that all variety and individuality are illusion. And also Advaitavad, the theory that the only truth is impersonal, undifferentiated oneness. These two philosophies. His teacher Yadava Acharya was a follower of that. One day his teacher began to explain his understanding of the beauty of Sri Krishna's eyes. So in this regard, the Chandogya Upanishad uses the word kapiyasam. Now Yadavacharya explained that kapi means monkey, and that the monkey's rear end, kapiyasam, is reddish on both sides. Those of you who've been to Vrindavan, you know this. He concluded that Krishna's lotus eyes are like a monkey, I can't even say this, that are like a monkey's rear end. Now, you know, actually in Srila Bharati Maharaj's Katha, which I also read, actually Ramanuja was giving massage to this Yadavacharya. And when he heard this statement, that Yadavacharya was explaining this poetical verse, as we just heard, tears started to come down his face and touched onto the body of this Yadavacharya. And then Yadavacharya, oh, you were crying? Why? And then he explained to his teacher that you have used such a low-grade example in your interpretation of the Sanskrit. And therefore my heart is so much wounded from hearing that description. So, yes. So Yadavacharya was explaining it in that way. And hearing this, Ramanuja began to weep. Now, later, when Ramanuja was massaging Yadavacharya, he told him, the explanation you have given for Kapiyasan is wrong. Told to his teacher. Kapi can be understood to mean that which takes water from everywhere. Who takes water? The sun. The word asan also means to blossom. Kapiyasam. So the word kapiyasam can be understood as that which blossoms under the sun. Or in other words, the lotus flower. Thus we can understand the verse to mean that the Lord's eyes are as beautiful as the lotus flower. Now, here's another little, in brackets, it's filling in. Sri Ramanujacharya took birth in a simple family. His mother and father were not very wealthy, but they were of a high caste, Brahmin caste, and they were learned, very learned. So Ramanuja was an outstanding boy from his childhood. And while under the guidance of a Mayavadi guru named Yadavacharya, he was very careful in his studies. And one day, when his guru was giving an impersonal explanation of a verse that contained the words Kapyasan, he compared the lotus eyes of the Lord to the hind part of a monkey, which is reddish near its tail. And hearing this from his Gurudev's mouth, Ramanuj began to cry in great pain. He felt grief in his heart that his Gurudev had used such a bad analogy for describing the lotus-like eyes of the Lord. So after collecting himself, he very politely asked if he could say something about the verse. Yadavacharya assented, and Ramanuja very nicely gave many explanations according to Sanskrit grammar. He said that the term Kapya Asan actually means one who brings water, and that is the sun. The lotus blossoms by the potency of the sun, and therefore the Lord's eyes are compared to the lotus, not the monkey. So Ramanuja's teacher became astonished when he heard Ramanuja telling this, and he started to think, if this boy is so knowledgeable at such a young age, what will he do when he is grown up? If he remains alive, this Mayavad teaching will be finished. His teacher then planned to murder him. When Yadavacharya heard this, he thought, oh, see what it's doing, like they said in the beginning, is they're mixing two different kathas. When Yadavacharya heard this, he thought, the boy is dangerous. He is very expert and is giving such nice explanations. In the future, he might uproot all the impersonal teachings from the Vedas. So I must kill him. Thinking to trick Ramanuja, Yadavacharya told him that he was going to travel with all his students to do some preaching, and that Ramanuja should also accompany them. Ramanuja was a very sincere and innocent boy, so he didn't understand his teacher's intentions. Then, when they were all in a very deep forest, they decided that this would be the time to murder him. Govinda, his cousin brother, who was also going on that tour, privately took him aside and told him of their plan. And he urged him to quickly flee from there. Therefore, in the middle of the night, Ramanuja told him that he was going to the toilet, and he ran away. Now, alone, he suddenly saw a hunter. Srila Bharati Maharaj describes, because he just immediately, without bringing anything with him, he began to run through the forest when Govinda told him that. And he was running and running, and the forest was just getting deeper and deeper, and the darkness was also coming at that time. And not only that, but he was extremely thirsty. So now he was in some dilemma, but then all of a sudden, he saw a hunter in the middle of the forest, sitting there with his wife, holding a hurricane light. The man asked him, "Where are you going?" Ramanuja answered, "I am going to Kanchipuram." Then the man replied, "We are also going there, so come with us." Yeah. See, this is a little different. Srila Bharati Maharaj tells, I'll just read what Gurudev said here. When he arrived at Kanchipuram, his own village, which was very far away, those persons disappeared. Ramanuja then began to weep, and he understood that it was certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan himself, along with his eternal consort, Lakshmi Devi, who had saved his life. But Srila Bharati Maharaj said that because he was so thirsty, that hunter also had some kind of jug of water with him. And he offered that to Ramanujacharya. And Ramanujacharya began to drink and drink. And then he started to fall asleep. And he fell asleep, and when he woke up in the morning, he was looking around, where am I? And he was right near Kanchipuram. So either way, either through mystic transport or through going with them, he came to his village. But they disappeared. Now throughout the day and night, this is the other part. Throughout the day and night he passed through the dense forest. It was difficult for him to discern his way, especially at night. The Lord, seeing his dear devotee in such a state, then he appeared in the form of Braj, and holding a lantern in his hand, he showed Ramanuja the way. Thus, within no time at all, Sri Ramanuja crossed the entire distance of the forest, and he found that he was standing outside his village. Sometime later, Ramanuja's teacher returned to the village. They were going to go on like a 3-month tour. So he had been thinking that perhaps a lion or a tiger had eaten Ramanuja, and he was very happy, the teacher. However, when he arrived, he saw that Ramanuja was alive, and he called him, and he told him to forget everything that had happened. Then Ramanuja again resumed his Sanskrit studies with Yadavacharya. Here's the other in brackets. After some days, out of compassion for Yadavacharya, and with a desire to deliver him, Ramanuja again began studying under his guidance. After some years, Ramanuja converted Yadavacharya to Vaishnava philosophy, whereupon his teacher became his disciple. At one point thereafter, Ramanuja began hearing of the qualities of a great Vaishnava guru in South India by the name of Sri Yamunacharya, and he eventually became Sri Yamunacharya's disciple. Later, he married. After his marriage, he began to teach boys in a Sanskrit school, and all the students liked him. Later on, when he married and his wife was very quarrelsome, her behavior was discourteous and uncooperative, and incidents would often take place which he would somehow have to tolerate. So here's a story about the treatment that his wife was giving. One day, a disciple of Sri Yamunacharya named Kanchipurna, he came to the house of Ramanuja. And he was from a very low-caste family, but he was a very high-class devotee. And he came there along with his wife by the order of his Gurudev, Yamunacharya. And he now began to give his association to Ramanujacharya. So a disciple of Sri Yamunacharya and elder godbrother of Ramanuja, named Kanchipurna, came to Ramanuja's village along with his wife. And Ramanuja accepted Kanchipurna as a Siksha guru. One day, when Ramanuja's wife was drawing water from the well, Kanchipurna's wife was also there drawing water. And some water from the bucket of Kanchipurna's wife fell into Ramanuja's wife's bucket. She immediately became very angry, and she started to insult the wife of Kanchipurna with abusive language. When Kanchipurna returned, his wife told him of the incident at the well, and he immediately left the house of Ramanujacharya. Upon hearing the reason why his Siksha guru had departed, Ramanujacharya began to think, I should not be with this lady. Somehow I should give her up right away. So one day, when Kanchipurna's wife was taking some water from his, it's going over. I don't know if I should keep on reading, because they have, you know what I'm saying? There's a bracket, and it takes it from this other Katha that Gurudev gave, but then we're rereading part of what I just read. So I think I'm going to skip that. So later, Sri Yamunacharya sent Purnacharya, this is a different person, Purnacharya, to bring Ramanuja to him in Sri Rangam, Yamunacharya, who later became his guru. So, however, Yamunacharya was very sick at that time. And by the time that Ramanuja arrived in Sri Rangam, he had departed from the vision of the world. Purnacharya was sent there to bring him to Sri Rangam. And Ramanuja used to give him so much honor, always offering him obeisances and treating him like his Siksha Guru. So while living with Ramanuja, Purnacharya began to impart the instructions he had received from his Gurudev, Sri Yamunacharya. One day when Ramanuja was teaching at the school, a hungry Brahmin came there. Ramanuja told him, if you go to my house to beg, my wife will give you something. However, when the Brahmin went there, Ramanuja's very cruel wife said, I can't give you anything. Go, get out of here. The Brahmin returned to Ramanuja, who then told him to go back to his house and to tell my wife a different thing. Tell my wife, I am coming from the house of your father. He sent me to you, so please take this letter from him. And Ramanuja personally wrote the letter he gave to the Brahmin to deliver to his wife. You understand? So he's posing that he wrote this letter supposedly from his father, right? The letter stated, your brother will marry very soon, so you must come to your father's house. And after reading the letter, Ramanuja's wife began to honor that Brahmin, and she gave him a large quantity of delicious prasadam. Yes. So writing these words very nicely, he folded that letter, and he tied it with colorful threads, and along with that he sent a coconut and other auspicious items. He then gave that letter to the Brahmin and said, now go again to my wife, she will welcome you nicely this time. The Brahmin went again, and after reading the letter, Ramanuja's wife's behavior completely changed. This time she welcomed him warmly and sweetly and offered him all kinds of palatable food and sweets. And when Ramanuja came home, his wife told him about the marriage. She cited her father's request for both of them to come and requested him to please come along. Then Ramanuja said, no, I cannot come, for I am very busy. You may go now with this Brahmin. Don't be late. And when his wife left to go to the house of her father, Ramanuja also left that house. He went to Sri Rangam to meet his Gurudev, Sri Yamunacharya. But Yamunacharya had left his body just before Ramanuja arrived. Ramanuja saw that many devotees were walking with the transcendental body of Yamunacharya. All of his disciples were weeping as they carried his body to be placed in samadhi. So he arrived just at that time. Huh? I'll read this other section. After his wife left with that Brahmin, Ramanuja locked the door of his house, and he went to Sri Rangam to meet his Gurudev, Sri Yamunacharya. He wanted to take sannyas from him. But when he reached Sri Rangam, he found that Sri Yamunacharya had just passed away, and his disciples were walking in procession with his divine body. And Ramanuja felt very disheartened and sad. Then he told them, to all the devotees there, he said, I have accepted Yamunacharya as my Gurudev. I want to see his face. And this is the first time that he's met Yamunacharya, but he's meeting him just after he left his body, right? So Yamunacharya's disciples stopped and they lifted the cloth from his body. Ramanuja could see that 3 of Yamunacharya's fingers were folded, like this. Like 3 were folded, and his hand was like that. The other fingers were closed. So he inquired, he inquired from the disciples all around as to why this was. And he wanted to know when it happened. No one could answer. They said, we didn't notice it before. It must have happened just now. Now he promised in front of all the persons present there, I will write the Sri Bhasya commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. That's his personal commentary. There's 4 Vaishnavacharyas. They each wrote one commentary. So that's Ramanujacharya's commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So as soon as he made this proclamation, I will write this commentary, then one of the fingers immediately became straight. Then he said, I will take sannyas. And the second finger relaxed also. Lastly, he said, I will preach the mission of my Gurudev, Yamunacharya, at which time the last finger relaxed and became straight. Seeing this, everyone present became astonished. Ramanujacharya became silent, and after some time, he spoke, addressing Sri Yamunacharya's transcendental body. Yeah. Yes, he also said, for the third thing, he said, Jai Shri Shri Guru Govinda Ki Jai. He said, I will systematically write about Vaishnava etiquette, explaining the behavior required to execute pure devotional service and what precautions should be taken. I will also preach this throughout India. Then after uttering this third statement, Sri Ramanujacharya observed, along with all present, 3 of Yamunacharya's fingers had now opened. So then and there, Sri Ramanujacharya formally accepted Tridandi Sannyas from Yamunacharya. Then and there. So after Yamunacharya was given Samadhi, Ramanujacharya was elected to become the next Acharya as Yamunacharya's successor. And he immediately said, I will not become the next Acharya right away. Give me time. Give me 2 years. He then spent some time with each of the prominent disciples of Yamunacharya. He served them and he heard from them what they had learned from their Gurudev. And only after hearing from them for 2 years did he accept the post of Acharya. So, what do we learn from this? He had never personally heard, he had never been in the presence of Yamunacharya physically. He had never heard him giving lectures and so forth. He had associated with a couple of his disciples, as we just read. But now, he's just taken sannyas in the presence of all the disciples who had absolutely no dispute that because of that miraculous exchange, he's definitely the next Acharya, you see. So they all wanted him to take that post, but he said, no. First, for 2 years, I will associate with and serve all of the senior godbrothers of mine who had spent so much time, and I will hear from them how they understood the teachings of Yamunacharya. Yes. So, sometimes Gurudev is saying that Sri Ramanujacharya accepted the orders of his godbrothers, but before sitting and acting as the Acharya, he went to each of his godbrothers for 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, or 1 year, and served each of them. Then he thus formally endeavored to understand the teachings of Sri Yamunacharya, since he had not gotten the opportunity to spend much time with him. After serving and satisfying them, he commenced his role as Acharya of the Sri Sampradaya in Sri Rangam. Later, the ruler of that country, King Kolutunga, II, heard that Ramanujacharya was very strongly preaching his philosophy. Kolotunga II wanted him killed, fearing that if he remained alive, the Shaiva Sampradaya, comprised of so-called devotees of Lord Shiva, would be finished. So he sent a message telling Ramanujacharya to come at once for a debate. Ramanujacharya and all his associates knew that the king wanted to kill him. So his disciple Kuresh told him, here's the famous Kuresh. He told to his guru, Gurudev, please do not go. I will go in your place. Please give me your danda and sannyas cloth. Then insisting, Kuresh took them from him and gave him his own white cloth. He told Ramanuja to leave that place at once. Then, having taken his guru's sannyas cloth and danda, Kuresh went to the palace of the king. In the palace there was a great debate, during which Kuresh defeated all the king's pundits. However, Kuresh was alone, so the king's pundits told everyone that he had been defeated, instead of telling that he defeated everyone. They forcibly detained him and only released him after blinding him by plucking out both of his eyes. He then began to search for his Gurudev, who was now very far away. Fortunately, after some time, he came to the same village where Ramanujacharya was residing. Within that village, there were two disciples, one very rich and one very poor. And Ramanujacharya told his disciples to go to the house of the rich devotee, because his group was more than 50 in total, and to ask him to prepare prasadam and a place for all of them to stay. Two of Ramanuja's disciples went to the rich man's house and gave him this message. The rich man felt extremely happy and became totally absorbed in preparing for the arrival of Ramanujacharya and all of his devotees. However, he didn't come back. He didn't come back out to share these plans with his two godbrothers at the door. So his two godbrothers were waiting, and he didn't come back and shared his plans. Yes, I'm going to make all arrangements. So after waiting for some time, those disciples went back to Ramanujacharya, and they told him that they had gone to the house of that rich devotee, but he had left them waiting and had not come back to them. Then Ramanujacharya replied, "Oh, then we will all go to the house of that poor man." That very poor Brahmin used to go and beg for ingredients so that his wife could cook prasadam. He had only one piece of proper cloth which his wife used, so when he would go begging, he would take the cloth of his wife. On that particular day, after midday, he could not collect any more, and he decided to return home. In the meantime, before his return, Sri Ramanujacharya with all of his disciples suddenly came to his house. His wife was very happy to see her Gurudev, but she also felt very ashamed because she had no proper cloth to wear. Sri Ramanuja understood this and gave her his own chadar. She wrapped this around herself and came in his presence. After she gave a mat for her Gurudev and his followers to sit on, she began to wonder, how shall I arrange prasadam for everyone? She remembered that one of her neighbors, who was a rich businessman, was very attracted to her and had lusty desires toward her. He had previously told her of his desires, but she was very chaste and has always rejected his proposals. However, in her current predicament, she went to that man and she told him that she would fulfill his desire. She was thinking, what is the use of my chastity if I cannot serve my Gurudev? For my Gurudev, I should be prepared to do anything. And she told that rich man, I am ready to do what you want, but in return, I want you to arrange many ingredients so that I can cook and give prasadam to my Gurudev and all of his disciples. Hearing this, the rich man became very joyful and gave her more than what she wanted. And taking all that he gave her, she prepared very good prasadam for all the devotees, and everyone was happy. So while Ramanuja and all the devotees were resting after prasadam, her husband returned home. And he asked her, Gurudev and all his disciples have come. How are we going to arrange for their needs? And she replied, I have done everything. There is nothing to worry about. They have all taken prasadam and are resting now. Then her husband asked, how did you make all those arrangements? She began to tell him the story about the lusty neighbor. She said, I was thinking that my Gurudev has come. If I cannot serve him, then what is the use of my chastity? So I went and told that lusty man that if he would give me all the ingredients to make very nice prasadam, then I would offer myself. He did as I asked. So now that it is night, I must go to him. Her husband told her, I will come with you. It was raining at that time. So they took an umbrella and went to the house of that rich person along with the Mahaprasadam. The wife entered his home alone, and the man became very happy. The man asked her, it is raining heavily tonight, and it appears you have come all alone. Didn't anyone bring you? She told him, my husband came with me, and she gave him the prasadam remnants of Ramanujacharya. The lusty man took those remnants and became totally transformed. He fell flat at the lotus feet of that lady and begged her, excuse me, excuse me. The lady and her husband then returned to their house. The next day their neighbor came to Ramanujacharya and prayed to him, I want to be initiated by you. The Ramanujacharya then initiated him. In the meantime, Quresh arrived in the village of the poor devotee couple where Ramanujacharya was staying. Seeing Quresh, Ramanujacharya called out his name. Quresh went to his Gurudev and wanted to take his darshan, but he had no eyes. Then Ramanujacharya put his hand over Quresh's wounds, and 2 eyes at once manifested. He could see again. Afterward, Ramanujacharya went to North India. After traveling for a long time, he eventually arrived in Kashmir. He went to Sarada Peeth, the place of Sarada Devi, where he came across the Bodhayan Bhashya commentary of Vedanta Sutra. The Bodhayan commentary contained Vaishnava philosophical conclusions, not Mayavad theories. In the library at Sarada Peeth, he read that commentary, and in the night he took that book and he escaped with Quresh. They fled from there, but the Kashmiri Pandits followed them. Finally, the Pandits took the book and they returned to their own place. Ramanuja was very unhappy, but Quresh told him, Gurudev, do not be unhappy. I have also read that book, and I remember all its contents. I will write them down. He had photographic memory. Later he did this, and he gave the writings to Ramanujacharya. Ramanujacharya then wrote his Sri Bhasya on the Vedanta Sutra and fulfilled the 3 desires of his Gurudev Yamunacharya. There's another section. When Sri Yamunacharya officially became the Acharya, he began very strongly preaching the cult of Sri Yamunacharya. In South India, 2 impersonalist sects are very prominent, Shaiva and Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya's followers subscribe to the Vedanta Sutras like Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma and Tattvam Asi. They think themselves impersonal Brahma, God, and they think everything comes from Brahma. The Shaiva school considers Lord Shiva to be the ultimate truth, and they want to merge into him. This is the basic difference between the 2. Sri Ramanuja refuted and defeated all impersonalism by his very strong and active preaching. Yeah.
I think one of the things, Gurudev told that story at our house about the lady.
Yeah.
And I think the context of understanding just what a Vaishnava lady in that day, what her chastity meant to her. It was more than anything. It was the most valuable ornament.
Yeah. Well, same with the gopis. That's why they're so glorified. They give up that which is impossible to give up. So this lady Actually, her name is Lakshmi. And she was very beautiful. This is in Srila Bharati Maharaj's commentary, he said. But she was so absolutely devoted, they were completely poverty-stricken, you know. And just see, that's such faith in her Guru, Guru Nishta. So there is an end note here that Sri Ramanujacharya has also refuted the arguments of Shankar in his own commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which is known as the Sri Bhashya. He states, Sri Shankaracharya has tried to equate the Pancharatras with the philosophy of the atheist Kapila. And thus he has tried to prove that the Pancharatras contradict the Vedic injunctions. The Pancharatras state that the personality of Jiva, called Sankarshan, has emerged from Vasudev, the supreme cause of all causes. That Pradyumna is also, it says that Pradyumna, the mind, has come from Sankarshan, and that Aniruddha, the ego, has come from Pradyumna. But one cannot say that the living entity, the jiva, takes birth or is created, for such a statement is against the injunctions of the Vedas. As stated in the Katha Upanishad, living entities, as individual spiritual souls, can have neither birth nor death. All Vedic literature declares that the living entities are eternal. Therefore, when it is said that Sankarshan is jiva, this indicates that he is the predominating deity of the living entities. And similarly, Pradyumna is the predominating deity of the mind, and Aniruddha is the predominating deity of the ego. It has been said that Pradyumna, the mind, was produced from Sankarshan. But if Sankarshan were a living entity, this could not be accepted, because a living entity cannot be the cause of the mind. The Vedic injunctions state that everything, including life, mind, and the senses, comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is impossible for the mind to be produced by a living entity, for the Vedas state that everything comes from the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Lord. So this is a very lengthy, we don't have time now, very lengthy extract from the writings of Sri Ramanujacharya. And then there's one last little note that says, for a detailed refutation of Shankaracharya's arguments attempting to prove that Sankarshan is an ordinary living being. So one may refer to Srimad Sudarshanacharya's commentary on the Sri Bhashya, which is known as the Shruta Prakashika. So this is written, what I just read, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Adi Lila 541. Yes. And we'll be reading that in a couple of days, because that's the chapter that glorifies Lord Nityananda. So, Sri Ramanujacharya's Transcendental Disappearance Day Festival Ki Jai. Sri Ram Anuja, the incarnation of Lakshman Jiu Ki Jai. It also says that Ananta, that he is also Ananta. Ramanujacharya is also Ananta. So we bow down at his divine lotus feet and we pray that we can be so absorbed in Guru Seva and so completely surrendered to Sri Guru, like he was, and all of his prominent disciples. So by his blessings and mercy, we can become pure devotees, just as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he studied and gave 108 different teachings from Ramanujacharya that are implemented in Gaudiya Math. Jai Sri Ramanujacharya Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. Vansha kalpadurvascha kripa sindhuvi vacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnave